Ready to vote. Republicans prepare the final details in their tax reform bill. We'll tell you what made the cut. Security strategy. The president announces new guidelines for keeping the country safe. We have the details. Amazing race. Some experts say Pennsylvania's campaign for governor is the most important one of 2018. We'll tell you why. And a papal party. Pope Francis celebrates his 81st birthday. We'll show you who he celebrated it with. On EWTN News Nightly for Monday, December 18th, 2017. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you for joining us for News from a Catholic Perspective. I'm Wyatt Goolsby, in for Lauren Ashburn. Republicans are within sight of a major legislative victory for their party and the president. Stocks soared with traders optimistic over odds of tax reform passing, but it's likely to get done by a razor-thin majority since all Democrats oppose the legislation. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi reports. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Wyatt. We're expecting votes on tax reform in both the House and the Senate as early as tomorrow. Now, a detail in the final plan could help families who want to send their kids to Catholic schools. The big question, will Republicans deliver?
U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin makes a closing pitch on tax reform.
So this will be very large tax cuts for working families and very large tax cuts for businesses to make them competitive.
But Senator John McCain of Arizona will not vote on the GOP tax bill later this week. The cancer patient is now home in Arizona after being hospitalized for a viral infection. Republicans have locked down the crucial support of two linchpins, Senators Marco Rubio of Florida and Bob Corker of Tennessee. Democrats call the GOP bill irresponsible.
Republicans continued to push their tax bill that would devastate middle-class and working Americans and explode our national debt.
One provision in the bill expands 529 accounts. It would allow parents to set aside money for kindergarten through high school. In 1996, Congress set up the accounts for college. Anyone can invest in a child's 529 account. It gains interest tax-free.
This is going to be such a tremendous opportunity.
This conservative education scholar says this could greatly expand school choice, giving parents options beyond their local public school.
Whether it's Catholic schools or homeschooling, whatever it might be that works for their child's unique learning needs is now going to be on the table for them.
Another group in favor of school choice is responding to critics who say it won't benefit low-income families. Ed Choi says, "We understand this is not a solution for every family. It's a good start, and we must work to expand access as quickly as possible."
Education Secretary and school choice promoter Betsy DeVos says she's happy with the inclusion of K-12 schools in 529 saving plans. Wyatt?
Now, Jason, I understand Betsy DeVos's former school choice organization also commented on the 529 savings plan?
That's right. The group's called the American Federation for Children. They tell us this is a step in the right direction, but they say Congress and the administration must take bolder action in 2018 to boost school choice for low-income families.
And we'll be following this week to see if they can get that done. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi, thanks so much. The Trump administration is blocking two pregnant teens from getting abortions. They're both in the country illegally and being held in federal custody. It's nearly a repeat of a scenario earlier this year where the ACLU helped a 17-year-old being detained in Texas get an abortion following a court battle. Lawyers for the Department of Health and Human Services say they have a policy of refusing to facilitate abortions. President Trump announces a new national security strategy. His policy reverses some Obama-era priorities and applies an America First approach to global relationships. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Wyatt. The president said the U.S. has to protect itself not only from foreign enemies, but also foreign policies and international partnerships that he says can harm the U.S. economy.
Economic security is national security. Economic vitality, growth, and prosperity at home is absolutely necessary for American power and influence abroad. Any nation that trades away its prosperity for security will end up losing both.
In his speech at the Ronald Reagan International Trade Center in Washington, the president covered a broad range of national security concerns. He says the U.S. will only take part in alliances that are fair, and he says member countries in the United Nations and NATO need to spend more money on defense.
A nation that is not prepared to win a war is a nation not capable of preventing a war.
President Trump's strategy also removes President Obama's 2015 declaration that climate change is an urgent and growing threat to national security.
We have withdrawn the United States from job-killing deals such as the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the very expensive and unfair Paris Climate Accord.
Catholic bishops have been outspoken on climate change. In November, the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops sent a letter to Congress requesting $10 million be dedicated to a United Nations body that directs climate policy. The letter says the blessings of God's creation and the duty to care for the common good overflow beyond our borders. And President Trump said today securing the U.S. border is critical to national security. He returned to his campaign promise to build the U.S.-Mexico border wall.
White House correspondent Mark Irons. Thanks, Mark. A federal judge in Philadelphia orders the Trump administration to ignore new rules allowing companies to opt out of providing free contraception to women due to religious objections. Judge Wendy Beetlestone says the rules are too sweeping. Later in the show, we will discuss this and the governor's race in Pennsylvania with a religious freedom advocate who says it's the most important vote of 2018. An Amtrak train making the first ever run along a faster new route hurdles off an overpass in Tacoma, Washington, spilling some of its cars onto the highway below. At least 6 people are dead. A total of 78 passengers and 5 crew members were aboard the train when it derailed about 40 miles south of Seattle. There was no immediate word on why the train left the tracks. President Trump tweeted his thoughts and prayers are with everyone involved with the accident. Russian President Vladimir Putin speaks on the phone with President Trump for the second time in 3 days. Putin called the White House on Sunday to thank the president for a tip from the CIA that thwarted a terror attack. Kremlin officials say an ISIS-inspired plan called for a suicide bomber to strike a busy part of St. Petersburg this month. The two also spoke on the phone on Thursday. A suicide attack on a Methodist church in Pakistan Sunday kills 9 and injures 60 others. The ISIS-inspired killings took place in the city of Quetta, around 40 miles from the Afghan border. Officials say a security guard killed a second suicide bomber, and if he hadn't, the death toll would have been much higher. Christians make up 2% of the country's population and face frequent persecution. The Philippines and Australia finished their first joint military training exercise. This in response to a siege by a pro-Islamic state group in the southern Philippines last year. The drills focused on combat in urban terrain. The countries say they will train together again in 2018. The former president of Chile wins a runoff election and will return to power. Sebastián Piñera's victory is the latest by a South American politician from the right. He defeated current president Alejandro Guillermo by nearly 9 percentage points. The 68-year-old Piñera ran on a platform of boosting sluggish economic growth. Thousands of Cubans take part in an annual pilgrimage to honor Lazarus. Some show their devotion to the beloved saint by crawling to a church with his image. The pilgrims flock to the Church of San Lazaro, where they say a painting of the saint can deliver physical health, emotional relief, and even prosperity. Some arrive at the location on their knees as a form of penance. In past years, up to 90,000 have taken part in the procession. Lazarus is the patron saint of lepers. Pope Francis appeals for the release of 6 religious sisters who were kidnapped 1 month ago from their convent in southern Nigeria.
Mi unisco di cuore all'appello dei vescovi della Nigeria.
During his Angelus this Sunday, the Holy Father also prayed for others in similar situations around the world. Yesterday also marked Gaudete Sunday, when children from across Italy bring their figures of baby Jesus for a blessing. Pope Francis advised the faithful to allow ourselves to be attracted by Christ's tenderness in the Nativity. The Holy Father encourages young people to fix their attention on the events in the life of Jesus. He spoke to members of Catholic Action Group on Saturday at the Vatican. The delegation included boys and girls accompanied by their teachers from 12 different Italian dioceses. A Vatican official says a recent report on clergy sex abuses in Australia misses the point when it suggests the churches lift its demand of celibacy for priests. Our Vatican correspondent, Juliet Lindley, got exclusive reaction from Father Hahn Zollner, who advises the Pope on the crisis.
I think that the celibacy for diocesan clergy is something that one can reflect upon. It has not always been there, but it has been there for more than 1,000 years now. And I think that is not something that, coming from one angle in the church, can be changed for the whole church. So I think there is also something we need to take into account for different circumstances and for different times. But I believe that this is not the main question. The main question is how celibate seminarians and priests and religious can live out the vows or the promise of celibacy in a meaningful, integrated way. This is the most important question that we have to face. So it's all about formation. It's all about how people can learn to live with their emotions, their needs, their relational encounters, and their sexuality.
There's also concern that the Commission is proposing that priests be forced to break the seal of confession. Now, what does the Church teach about the importance of the seal of confession, and how should Catholics respond to that proposal?
Now, the recommendation says precisely two things. Clarify, so they ask the Australian bishops to clarify with Rome and let us know what Rome replies on 2 points. The first point is, if a child says during a confession to a confessor that he or she has been abused, what does it mean for the confessor? Is this something that he needs to keep under the seal of confession? From my point of view, but also from many canon lawyers that I have consulted, the answer is clear. This is not a sin that this child confesses. It's a crime that has been committed against this child. So there is no sin, so there is no seal of confession. So the confessor is not obliged to keep that under any kind of seal. The second point that the Royal Commission wants to clarify is whether a confessor can oblige somebody to self-report him to police. Now, again, this is in church law very clear. It is not possible to oblige anybody to self-report himself to police. What a confessor can always do is to withhold a confession or to defer it. So in any case, I think these 2 points are not a general, so to say, demand to abolish the seal of confession or to oblige priests at any cost to breach the seal of confession, but there are very specific 2 questions, and I think from a theological and canonical point of view, they are not difficult to answer to.
Father Zollner, thank you so much for coming, and thank you so much for your interview.
Thank you.
Coming up, controversial words. A new report says the Centers for Disease Control may be banned from using certain phrases. We'll tell you what they are. And not in the holiday spirit. We discuss a recent study on the increasing hostility of Americans towards the term Christmas.
Ha imparato a dire papà.
At his daily Mass in the Vatican, Pope Francis praises St. Joseph for knowing how to listen to the voice of God and how to go forward in silence. He says Joseph didn't understand fully his role as the earthly father of Christ, but after he heard God's request, he believed. Thanks for joining us. I'm Wyatt Goolsby, in for Lauren Ashburn. A report in the Washington Post says the nation's top public health agency is being told not to use certain words or phrases in official budget documents, like fetus or transgender. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin tells CNN he's never heard of a ban.
Has the administration ever told you not to use certain words?
Absolutely not. Nobody's told me not to use certain words, and I've never told anybody in Treasury not to use certain words.
Health and Human Services says the report, which cites an anonymous source, is not accurate. A recent Senate special election in Alabama included cameos by the president and a former president, plus allegations of sexual misconduct. But there's another political campaign that might be even more relevant, at least when it comes to families and faith: the 2018 race for governor of Pennsylvania. Our next guest says Pennsylvania is the most important race in the midterms. Anna Anderson, Director of Religious Freedom at the American Principles Projects, joins us now. So Anna, why do you believe that Pennsylvania is the most important governor's race?
Thank you for having me. Yeah, last summer, the conservative media picked up on a story run by the Rolling Stone magazine about about LGBT mega donor Tim Gill, who had pledged his $500 million fortune to injecting this issue into races across the country, specifically in LGBT laws that criminalize Christians, that force open women's bathrooms, locker rooms to the opposite sex, the law that Jack Phillips is currently being punished under, that is criminalizing Catholic hospitals that refuse to perform transgender sex change surgeries, as well as Catholic adoption agencies. So that's what is at stake in this Pennsylvania election. In that story, HRC pledged to be spending $27 million in order to elect officials who will pass those laws.
Wow, 27. I mean, you think about the millions of dollars being spent on this. Yes. That's incredible. You know, another big issue when you talk about the state of Pennsylvania is the HHS mandate. You know, on Friday, a federal judge ordered the Trump administration to sort of sidestep the new rules that allow companies to opt out of birth control mandate if they have religious objections. What kind of an impact will a governor have on conscious rights?
Yeah, so unfortunately in this case, the Pennsylvania Attorney General, Josh Shapiro, who is taking the Trump administration to court again on this, and the Little Sisters of the Poor, is not under control of the Pennsylvania governor. He's independently elected, but what this shows us is how much impact elections can really have. We need a president who will elect good judges who aren't going to be activists on this, and the Pennsylvania governor can have a role. One of the candidates actually has promised to pursue a course of action which would involve religious freedom waivers in the state for employers who wish to be exempt from the contraceptive mandate. Whether the courts take that into account as the Little Sisters continue down their path of litigation is uncertain right now.
Sure. So many big issues in the state of Pennsylvania with this governor's race. I know you've been following a number of other governor's races around the country. What are some of the other big ones?
Yeah, so HRC's plan with injecting money into these elections is to focus on swing states and then eventually southern states. So a couple more that they've targeted are Rust Belt states, including Pennsylvania, Ohio, Wisconsin, Michigan. So I think the two other significant races that you're going to want to watch out for are Michigan, where the Attorney General has actually taken a stand against the Michigan Civil Rights Commission for attempting to go around the legislature and inject this issue into Michigan law. And then also the governor's race in Georgia, where the current Republican governor, Nathan Deal, has already told the Republican candidates to stand down on religious freedom issues because he saw what happened when HRC went after Governor McCrory, simply for saying that men are men and women are women and bathrooms are private places, especially for women and vulnerable children.
Yeah, so many big issues that certainly social conservatives will be following. I thought congressional midterm races were going to be such the big thing, but now when you think about the governor's races as well, it's going to be a very interesting midterm election. Anna Anderson, Director of Religious Freedom at American Principles Project, thanks so much for talking with us.
Thank you for having me.
As Texas and Florida continue to rebuild from a devastating hurricane season, the Knights of Columbus is offering $1.4 million to aid the reconstruction of badly damaged churches. Hurricanes Harvey and Irma caused billions of dollars in damage in August and September. As always, we thank the Knights of Columbus for their support of EWTN News Nightly. A massive wildfire in Southern California has become one of the largest in modern history, and it continues to rage. The Thomas blaze has burned more than 420 square miles, making it the state's third largest wildfire in recent history. It's only 40% contained, but officials say they plan to take advantage of the better weather this week with forecasts of 2 days of low winds and cooler temperatures. More than 750 homes have been lost. A major headache Sunday at the world's busiest airport. A fire in an underground electrical facility brought the main Atlanta airport to a standstill, with hundreds of flights being canceled. Power was fully restored around midnight, but the airport, which serves more than 100 million passengers a year, is still struggling to fully get back on track. Up next, Nativity Scenes. We asked you to show us your creches at home. We'll have a look at what you sent us. And no topping this, Pope Francis celebrates his 81st birthday with some special guests. 3 astronauts representing the U.S., Russia, and Japan are on their way to the International Space Station. They will spend more than 4 months in space, conducting more than 200 science investigations. The group, with NASA's Scott Tingle, are scheduled to dock at the space station early Tuesday. Welcome back. I'm Wyatt Goolsby in for Lauren Ashburn. A new study by Pew Research Center has bad news for Christians. It says Americans believe the religious aspects of Christmas are declining in public life. The study says 46% of Americans believe Christmas primarily is a religious holiday. That's down from 51% in 2013. It also finds 54% of Republicans say Merry Christmas, while only 19% of Democrats do. We're joined by Dr. Matthew Bunson, EWTN senior contributor, for more analysis. So, Matthew, religious Americans may find the study pretty disturbing. In your view, is this a result of the so-called war on Christmas?
Well, we have seen over the last decades a fairly relentless effort to drive Christianity out of the public square, to reduce its influence in culture. So I think two things are afoot. The first is the success they've had in reducing that influence in culture, but the other is his drive towards secularization, toward what I call taking Christ out of Christmas, where Christmas becomes more of a winter holiday or simply a bland religious holiday.
A season's greetings.
A season's greetings or a happy holidays type of moment. Right. For Americans, for American Catholics, this is a disturbing trend. The good news in this is that a solid majority of Americans still believe in Christmas. But what we're seeing is this withering away of belief, for example, in the historical reality, the fact of the Nativity.
So what then do you think Catholics can do to sort of counter that secular movement?
Yeah, there are two things. The first is to look at this as a religious liberty issue. This is something that we have to be able to defend, to articulate our right to celebrate Christmas as Christians, as Catholics. The other, though, starts with us. We have to start with Advent. Celebrate Advent. Adhere to Advent. Respect what Advent's trying to do, which is to prepare us spiritually for Christmas. And when Christmas comes then, celebrate it as what it is, the nativity of the Lord, the incarnation of God into history.
Sure. It was interesting because the study finds that even among religious nuns, those who are with no religious affiliation, even 85% of them say they still celebrate the holiday. It seems like an opening here. Do you think that that's kind of a way Christmas can be an opportunity we can get in and talk to them about the message of Christ?
Very much so. The nuns, the NONESs, still recognize that this is an important cultural moment for us every year. So we can build on that. We can help explain to family members, especially millennials, to people who are drifting away from the faith, to family, friends, everywhere, co-workers, the real meaning of Christmas, what undergirds all of this, why this matters. The report itself, though, is also disturbing in the sense of the way it looks at millennials. Each generation is getting worse in its adherence to respect for Christmas. So we need to focus very heavily on those millennials to help them understand why this matters.
And like you say, sometimes it's just so important just to get the information out, know exactly what Christmas is about, know exactly what Advent is about, what these stories are, and then educate them, essentially.
But also to live it.
Right.
To celebrate Christmas as we're called to by going to religious services. Only 51%, according to the Pew Study, are actually going to go to religious services this year. Gather up your family, gather up friends, take them with you. Help them to understand the real reason for this, the incarnation of God.
So important, and something that we're going to be praying on this Christmas. Matthew Bunson, EWTN senior contributor, thanks so much.
Great to be with you.
Last week, we asked you on social media to send us pictures of your nativity scenes, and you delivered. We want to share some of them with you right now. Sue Murtaugh shared this Christmas creche. She says it is 73 years old, and it was handmade for her mother and father by a carpenter. Levi Jacobs sent us this nativity scene with the 3 gifts from the 3 wise men. Another handmade scene, this one from Kath Lynch, who says it is made from wood, paper, and cane from Assisi, Italy. And finally, Kathy Court Thomas sent in a beautiful image of her nativity scene as well. You can continue to send them in on our EWTN News Nightly Facebook page, and we'll share them with you later this week. And finally tonight, celebrations fit for a pope. Pope Francis celebrated his 81st birthday yesterday with a party complete with a 13-foot-long pizza and a special cake. He was joined by sick children who use a Vatican health service. The Holy Father told the kids to talk with their grandparents because they have memory and roots, and he told their parents to be sure to teach their children to talk to God. And a good reminder of all of us as well, as that wraps up our newscast for tonight. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, thank you for watching. I'm Wyatt Goolsby. We'll be back tomorrow with more news from a Catholic perspective. Good night, and God bless.